welcome everyone to this first of our webinars for 2023. The series that we ran last year, I think, was very successful. We don't get a lot of feedback afterwards, but the people who did respond, particularly to Robin Geimer talking about macular degeneration, indicated that the people who were at that session really found it very valuable. I know there have been quite a few people who've watched the recording afterwards. So although we see about 20 people here, I'm sure that the recordings are valued by other people later on. We welcome our special guest today, Iain Edwards, who is the Interim CEO of Guide Dogs Victoria. And I'm sure Iain will tell us a little bit more about that in a moment. It's great to have you with us, Iain.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and thanks for the opportunity to come and speak to your group today. I'm Iain Edwards. As Jeffrey said, I'm the current Interim CEO of Guide Dogs Victoria. I have a fairly sort of long-standing relationship with Guide Dogs Victoria. One, as a client of Guide Dogs Victoria, I'm actually blind myself and accompanied by my guide dog Olympia, and she's my fourth guide dog that I've had through Guide Dogs Victoria, so quite a long relationship with Guide Dogs Victoria. I had also previously been on the board of Guide Dogs Victoria since 2011 and was chair since 2018. And in June last year, for an interim period, stepped into the role of Chief Executive Officer while we went searching for a new CEO to lead the organisation. And we did find a new CEO, so we've got a new CEO commencing in the middle of April, Nikki Long, who will commence with Guide Dogs Victoria in the middle of April. So I just want to start the presentation just to acknowledge the First People and Traditional Owners and Custodians of land where we're meeting today. I'm meeting on the land of our Kew campus on the edge of the Yarra River. So I'd like to pay my respect to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and at Guide Dogs Victoria, we respect the right for self-determination, and we continue to drive to ensure, as an organisation, we provide culturally safe and welcoming environment for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people. So our purpose at Guide Dogs Victoria is basically life without limits, and what we try and do is to ensure people who are blind or have low vision. We try and, through our vision, reduce some of the barriers to enable people to live a life of their choosing. So it's very much around the life without limits is supporting our clients to live the life of their choosing. But it's also what we try and do is to support our staff to think innovatively and creatively. It's around don't be limited or bound by history or heritage or how things have always been done, but actually think innovatively and creatively, and how can we support individuals to live the life of their choosing. So really the purpose it is very much focused around our end user or the beneficiary of the services that we provide, but it is also targeting our staff and trying to drive that sort of behaviour that we look for to try and encourage people to be innovative and creative and try and be different ways to meet the needs of our clients that we serve. Yes. So a little bit about the history of Guide Dogs Victoria. Guide Dogs Victoria opened in 1962 under the Prime Minister Robert Menzies at the time. Guide Dogs has a very interesting history within Australia, and there was a professor, or Dr. Arnold Cook, was a Australian who was living actually in Melbourne at the time, and he was blind, and he was supported by his wife to undertake his education and sort of further training in his tertiary education. He then moved back to the UK to complete his doctorate and became a professor of economics, and relocated back to Australia. But while he was in the UK, he got matched with a young Labrador who became his sort of guide dog while he was in the UK. At this stage, we didn't have guide dogs in Australia, or no guide dog schools in Australia. So he came back and originally came back to Western Australia, and then sort of moved across to Melbourne, and was one of the pioneers for the opening of our guide dog school in Melbourne in Victoria. Initially, the Guide Dogs Victoria was the the Royal Guide Dogs of Australia, and we provided the services and supports right across Australia. Today, though, each state's now got their own guide dogs organisation and their own entity. We still work quite collaboratively together under a federated model called Guide Dogs Australia. So there is a board and executive for Guide Dogs Australia that support us around really facilitate collaboration across the different states and be a advocate or a voice at a national level around government relationships and policy and different things. But that's how sort of like a little bit of the history of Guide Dogs Victoria. So just a bit of we serve predominantly people who are blind or have low vision. There's a bit over 450,000 people in Australia that actually have some level of blindness or low vision. So that's different to people who have there's about 13 million people with some sort of vision issue, which is predominantly corrected by glasses or by surgery. So there's about 450,000 people that have got what we call irreversible changes. Now, not all of those are severe changes. So they can be some quite mild impact and with very little impact on people's function or ability to engage in employment or engage in their community, right through to people who are totally blind. What we're seeing with this number is particularly increasing, and the increases are more so in the older population. So I heard Jeffrey, you mentioned earlier about macular degeneration, but what we're seeing at the moment with the increasing numbers of prevalence of people who are blind or have low vision tends to be in the over 65s, and it's directly related to things like macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy, and a range of other cataracts, and which some of that is reversible, but there's a range of sort of conditions that come more so with aging, and that's impacting on the prevalence of people requiring our supports. So what we do, as I said, our purpose is to support people to live a life without limits. But what we try and do is it's about changing individuals' lives to give them the life of their choosing. And it's around supporting them around their mobility, their freedom, their independence, their quality of life, and ensuring their inclusion. So we do a lot of work around ensuring, with people with a disability, it's ensuring our communities are inclusive, accessible communities. And so we do a lot of work with local government, with state government and the Commonwealth, and with our transport organisations. It's really trying to ensure that we provide an inclusive community, and we do quite a lot of work with employers to try and build inclusive, accessible workplaces. So people who are blind or have low vision can I guess, actively connect and contribute to our society through either, being involved with their community or being involved in employment. So even though our title is Guide Dogs, and most people know us for our guide dogs, and they are a big part of what we do as far as our business. We breed quite a substantial number of dogs per year, and work basically a number of them will go through to guide dogs, a number will go through our pets and therapy programs, and those that are reclassified or take a career change because they don't necessarily meet the behaviour needs that we're looking for, might end up as a pet somewhere in someone's sort of home. So they all add amazing values to individuals' lives and people's lives in a different sort of way, and I'll talk briefly a bit more about that later. But so dogs are a big part of our business, but what we do is more than dogs. So the impacts that we have on individuals and the services that we provide range from providing people with mobility support. So that's enabling people to independently navigate their home, their community, their workplace. And that might be with the use of a guide dog, but it could also be with the use of a white cane or use of different sort of technology, like what we call mini guides, which is like a little sonar sort of system, or even sort of other assistive technology and utilizing in the applications in your phones and different things. There's a number of adaptive technology pieces of equipment and applications that are readily available through phones. We also provide a number of services through assessment and services and care for people with acquired brain injuries, where they may have had a brain injury which has resulted damage to the occipital lobe or the back of their brain or the occipital lobes of the brain, which impacts their ability around their vision. And so that vision can be total blindness, can be part blindness, or what they call hemianopia, where your you lose the sight just to one side of your body. So we do a lot of work with individuals around after their acquired brain injury, working with them again to regain their sort of independence in mobility and functions. We also have a range of allied health services, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, both for adult and children, and that's partly, again, to help people keep active, keep them mobile. But with occupational therapy, give them the tricks and the trades, and they're very much looking at specialist services, working with people who are blind or have low vision, around how their personal activity, the daily living, so dressing, showering, grooming, making sure they can get the right socks out and the right shirts and clothes and those sort of things, getting how they can independently cook around the house, so the sort of domestic activities of daily living, so cooking, cleaning, caring for the house, caring for other members of the family who might be parents, and the community activity of the daily living. So around there, getting out shopping, banking, doing all the things, engaging in community. So occupational therapists play a big role in that. We have early child intervention services. So it's looking at giving children the best start in life. So children who are born blind or acquire blindness or low vision really early in life. It's about giving the opportunity for those children to develop the same as their sighted peers, so they can start to move into kinder and move into school with a level of development that gives them the capability to actually participate in kinder and school. So our early childhood intervention programs works very closely with the family and children to really support that early development of that child and give them the necessary skills to enable them to move into school at that age. We also have a number of programs working with our young adults, and where they go through school, and then our young adult teenagers as they leave school and start to look into employment, as well as working with adults and the older sort of person. And we do a lot of things around giving kids opportunities around camping, and our young adults doing programs where they plan holidays and travel and those sort of things to really build those skills and confidence and capabilities to independently engage with community and move towards or transitioning towards employment. If they're able to be employed, or most will be employed if they're around what they choose to be employed as. And we do a lot around orthoptics and assistive technology. And what we know is technology is a disruptor as far as enabling people to live a life they're choosing. There's so much available now in technology, screen readers on computers, and adaptive technology on the phones, which really support individuals who are blind and have low vision. Like I have an application that's called Seeing AI, which you could take a picture of something and it will convert, like a menu into audio text if you're out at a restaurant, or you could take a picture of an individual even, and it'll describe, I don't know how it does it, it'll describe the individual, and it approximately, and it's pretty close, reasonably accurate most of the time, approximately describe the individual, if they're happy, sad, colour of their hair, but also their age. So when it refers to me, it's a little bit out sometimes, but it refers to me that a 56-year-old male with sort of brown greying hair type thing, and I'll have to set up with a smile on his face or something like that. So it's really quite smart, the technology that's available nowadays. So we do a lot of work in supporting people how to use that technology to live a life of independence. I've just got a little short video we're just going to play, just to give it, to hear from the voice of some of our clients.
Play me down, down, sweetie. Down, down. Down, down. That's it, good girl. I was 18, and that was probably my first voyage of independence, or the first big step of independence. And if they weren't involved in my life from 12 up until now, I don't think I would have left the home. I don't think I would have been confident.
We've rewarded each other. I've just got the best thing that's ever happened to me, and likewise to her. She gets a good life.
The biggest thing, the freedom. It's like I was let out of jail.
I am not a stranger to the dark. I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we are glorious.
I wanted a dog that was going to improve my quality of life and my confidence and my independence, and she's definitely done that.
I am brave, I am brave. this is me.
We really sort of value the voice of our clients and the people that we serve, and it's just a really nice little video that reflects the voices of our clients and the impact, the life-changing impact some of our services, and particularly our guide dogs, provide to these individuals who are blind and have low vision and their families. Just some things that we like at an impact level. So, last year, this is the figures from the last year from the annual sort of report. So we did just under 22,000 hours of services to individuals, with just under 7,000 hours, those actually in our regional areas. And that's one of the real challenges for our services around how do we ensure equitable care across our state. And that's been a big sort of focus to try and ensure, doesn't matter where you live within Victoria, that you can access the necessary supports and services. So there's been a big sort of focus for us around a strategic focus around how we ensure people living in rural and regional areas aren't necessarily disadvantaged as far as the supports they need. Just 3,108 programs delivered, and what that means is, the individual programs to people around, whether it's a guide dog program or a child intervention program or whatever it might be. So that's sort of what that sort of describes. We do a net promoter score, and we actually get a net promoter score at 78. So it's got 78% there, but 78 net promoter score. And at a corporate or commercial level, a net promoter score of 78 would be considered really high. So that's often, we ask the question, how likely would you to be refer family and friends to our services? And so it's an incredibly high net promoter score for our service industry. 91% have achieved their goals. So when we start these sort of programs, we identify some of their goals and work towards those goals. Now, we don't get 100% because sometimes their goals or circumstances or situations change and we're unable to achieve their sort of full goals, but 91% of people achieve their sort of goals throughout their services. We had 140 pups into the year last year. And we've got that figures at 243 is a bit low. So it's about 200, just over 250 working guide dogs in Victoria, but just under, we do a lot across Australia. So there'd be just under 800 guide dogs across Australia that are operating. And so they might come out of one school, but live and then reside somewhere else. So there's quite a good chunk of dog training hours. It's our dog trainers marching up and down the pavements, training these sort of dogs, just over 6,000 hours of dog training hours. So 67 dogs matched with handlers. And so we do a fair bit of work, as I said before. Some of them are guide dogs, and this is during the COVID period, so we're a little bit under our normal sort of activity and targets. But we do a number that will go straight through to guide dogs, but we have quite a big program in our Pets of Therapy. We recognise and acknowledge the value of dogs around companionship and social and supporting people around their mental health and well-being. So we do a lot of work with Integra, which is supporting veterans coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder, but also in our facilities. So we're doing some work in our courts at the moment, and particularly in our family courts and family violence areas, around making sure there's dogs are available to provide that comfort and support they do in very stressful environments for families and children. And we have a number in different schools, and so it's a big part of the work we're doing, that sort of facilities work. We rely on volunteers. There's a lot of, our staff is about 150 staff, but we've got just over sort of 500 volunteers, and a lot of those are in that puppy raising space. So when we breed our puppies, those 140 dogs need to go out to some family around their puppy raising. So our puppy raisers do an amazing job of caring for these puppies, say between the age of 10 weeks right up to the age of between 12 to 14 months. And they do an incredible job in building and socializing that dog, developing those puppies into what are potential future guide dogs. So it's a huge commitment, and but a very rewarding commitment. Taking on the role here at Guide Dogs Victoria CEO, I don't know if it comes with the job, but I ended up getting a puppy myself to be puppy raising. So I've been puppy raising since my family's been puppy raising since sort of July, August last year, and it's incredibly rewarding. We've got a young young female Labrador, black Labrador, who's at about 11 months old now and will be coming in for her assessment in probably a couple of months. So it's been a really great experience. One of the big things we're doing at the moment at Guide Dogs Victoria, and I'm not sure if anyone ever drives past the Q campus on Chandler Highway, you would see it's basically a construction site. We've demolished a lot of our old buildings. I said our buildings, that going back to that earlier slide, were built in 1962, and there've been a bit of like add-ons along the way, but they're not necessarily, they weren't necessarily fit for purpose anymore. So we're building a campus which is going to be fit for purpose. It really enables us to deliver our service and support our beneficiaries, our clients, to build the necessary skills for them to be independent in the community. And what I mean by sort of a sensory campus is the campus is going to have, like when a blind person moves throughout the street, so how they navigate and how they orientate themselves through the street, they require and utilize all their senses beyond their sight. So whether you're walking with a white cane or walking with a guide dog. So when I live in Mornington, and so when I walk down my main street in Mornington, and to try and understand where I am, I'll be feeling for the tactiles on the ground as far as to understand when I'm approaching a road crossing. But I'll be, as I'm walking down Main Street, I'll be listening to the grinding of the cafes or the coffee, so I know where I am in relationship to the particular coffees. Walk past the flower shop and you'll smell the flowers, or walk past the chemist and you get the strong smell of the chemist. And I'll turn at the crossing area, and as I walk over the road and then in through the Empire Arcade, you get that sense of feeling that you've moved into an enclosed area, and you hear the sounds and the echoes around you from the arcade space. And then it opens up, and I can, well, what I say, walk past the butchers. It's always a very interesting spot for the dog. You always have a quick stiff and nose into the butchers. But so you use all your senses to navigate. So we're building a campus which actually is a highly sensory campus through our smells, our tactiles, the different floor coverings and walls and those sort of things, to really, where it absorbs sounds or reverses or echoes the sounds and those sort of things, to really enable these skills to be developed with people, which they will then transfer it into their life, into the community. So it's been a really exciting sort of build. This is like a black and white picture of our old building that was sort of built in sort of 1962. And as we now move it, we're really contemporizing the buildings. What we've done is we've looked at, we've built a veterinary hospital on site. So we don't run them, we lease it out to our advanced vet care who are running the specialist veterinary services. But we've got this beautiful veterinary facility on site now, as well as we've built a cafe which leads straight on to the Yarra there. So we haven't opened up the cafe at this stage, but we're looking at how we can diversify our income to make us more sustainable sort of moving forward, to help fund some of the supports and services that we deliver. This is a bit of just some internal photos of our sort of vet clinic, which is actually operational now, as well as our cafe. This is the bit of an image of what our front entry is going to sort of look like as we come into the campus into the future. And you'll see sort of some chimes and those sort of things. I said it's about, we want to create an audible spaces as well as a sensory garden for the smells, the sounds, the textures, to enable supporting people to really navigate through their senses and experience the campus through multiple senses. We're putting some chimes in there, so particularly for kids and children's programs, these big sort of musical instruments where the kids can play with these sort of instruments and really have a lot of fun. But it's about exploring their environment in a safe way. We're building a fairly large education centre which will be leased out to groups and other people as well. But it'll be where we'll run a number of different activities and programs and sporting activities for people, but as well as utilising it for some larger groups in our education, but other people better lease the space too. The question that I was also asked to talk about is about NDIS and what the National Disability Insurance Scheme, how that's impacted on the way services are provided at Guide Dogs Victoria and across the disability sector. NDIS only makes up a portion or part of our funding. So NDIS is partly funds up to say 20 to 30, just under about 27%. So 27% of our funding at Guide Dogs Victoria comes through the NDIS. where the majority of our funding is still considered philanthropic. So we still have a very large charitable as a charitable organisation, require the support of our donors and our supporters to help us deliver the supports that we provide. So we are looking at, over time, that may transition a bit higher in the NDIS space as far as our funding, but at the moment it would be predominantly through philanthropic. We have some small still government contracts and relationships, and we have a small amount of privately paid services and supports, but predominantly I would say just about 70% of our funding would still come through our fundraising. So what is the NDIS? So the National Disability Insurance Scheme was part of the disability reform back in 2017, and it's one of the largest social reforms since Medicare back in the 1970s. People can correct me if I'm wrong. But it's the largest reform that's occurred. It's enabled, I guess, the very different way services are provided and supports are provided, and the way they're particularly funded in the disability sector. And it was quite a big, it was a really big disruptor, and it really changed how disability organisations thought and the culture within organisations as we moved from what was traditionally what I call block funded activity. So we used to get some business, from government used to give us some funding to deliver that activity, and we would deliver that sort of activity and report back to the government. So we didn't have any sort of, the clients didn't have a lot of choice, and there would be the people would come to the services and receive their services. So what happened is with NDIS, it's around what all funding now is allocated to the participant or the client, and that client then now has choice and control around what sort of supports they would like and who they'd like to purchase those supports from. So it's created a really, I guess, a market or competitive market space in the disability sector, but it's driven organisations to ensure that we listen to our clients, or our, and moving to customers, but listen to our clients, understand what their needs are, and that we provide them the supports and the services that best meet their needs. So therefore, they will choose it as a service to provide that service, and then we will, through their NDIS funding, will pay for those sort of services. To be eligible for it, you need to be under the age of 65 when you have your disability, and you need to be an Australian sort of citizen, and you need to have a permanent disability. So it's it's not where you might have an injury, you go to rehabilitation, you recover, and you're back to normal. So it is around having a permanent disability. So that's sort of a little bit about the background of NDIS. Here's like a little bit of a graphic around, as I said, that change from what I call a block-funded model or government-funded model, a business to consumer, basically a business to government relationship, to now moving towards a business-consumer relationship. So we now have a much greater relationship with the consumer or the person purchasing those services and supports for us, and we have a much lesser relationship now with the government. So we're responsible to the participant and understanding, making sure our services meet their needs. But it's given us the opportunity as an organisation to be very innovative and creative. So the way we deliver services to meet those sort of needs is NDIS has really driven that innovation and creation and doing things differently to really make sure that we are meeting the needs of those individuals, and therefore those individuals are choosing us to provide those supports and services. Moving from a government relationship to the NDIS relationship, it really did drive the principles of NDIS about what they call choice and control, and in really trying to improve shared decision making, that organisations work closely with their clients who are the participants of the NDIS or National Disability Insurance Scheme. So we work closely with our clients and have that real shared decision making and really advocate and support choice and control. The way the NDIS is funded is that for the client, it really comes back to their goals and their needs. So there is a lot of, and you probably would have seen in the news and the media and a lot of different things. There are some challenges, I guess, in the implementation or application of NDIS in the disability sector, but for individuals with a disability, it's really supported them in enabling them to live a greater life of independence and receive the supports they need around their goals. So the plans are set up around understanding not just what the disability is, but more the impact of that disability and also what that person wants to achieve. So if the person has, you know, not a lot of, when I say not a lot of goals in the sense of, you know, they're very happy just being able to, you know, to live a life of, you know, I don't know, maybe not engage with a lot of activities and those sort of things, their goals or their needs might be a lot less, so therefore their supports will be a lot less. But if you've got someone with greater goals and greater engagement in employment and greater engagement with community and greater sort of needs, then their support plan will be a much greater sort of plan. And the plans are often divided into what we call core needs, so that's your general personal care and personal support needs. Your capacity building, so that's about what are we going to do to support that person to build independence. So that's like the therapy and the supports that we provide. And then you've got your capital, which is more your equipment. So what are the adaptive technology and equipment that person may require to be more independent? So the NDIS scheme is set up across those sort of three areas. Guide Dogs Victoria, we predominantly focus only in the capacity building and the capital and the equipment or assistive technology space. We don't provide a lot of those sort of core supports. We provide very much more in the capacity building and the equipment for people, assistive technology for people who are blind or have low vision. The figures are interesting. So, and you would, again, partly in the media, you would have seen there's going to be, like by 2030, the participants are going to be quite substantial, and that's 860,000 participants. And that's one of the challenges the Commonwealth or the government's currently having is how can they afford a scheme with the numbers when are looking up towards by 2030 that 860,000 people. Out of those, and at the moment we've just got a bit over 500,000 participants, so we're still under that, well under that 860,000. But people who are blind or have sensory loss or blind, that only makes up about 2% of all of the NDIS scheme. So the blind sector or areas around vision services are a very small component of the disability of the NDIS scheme and the disability. Predominantly, it's in the autism and intellectual disability space would make up the majority of the scheme, and then a breakdown of a range of other types of disabilities that will break up the balance of it. The average plan payment, so when we're looking at how it works, the average plan payment is about 33,000, and that really varies from individual to individual. As I said before, that's an average. Some people's plans are a lot less, and some people can have some really extensive sort of plans. One of the things the NDIS are also trying to work through is that a person might be given a plan of 44,000, but particularly in areas of what I call thin markets where there aren't a lot of services and supports. They might have all the funding in their plans for the supports, but there's no workforce or no one to provide those supports. So what the NDIS is seeing is these people might be given, say, a plan of around $44,000 to provide their supports, which has been sort of structured. But when they're doing a plan sort of review, they've only spent like 20,000. And having those conversations with those individuals, it's basically there's just the workforce at the moment, and particularly in our rural and regional areas, they're very, very challenging for people to access the supports they've been funded to do. So therefore they're not meeting their goals or not meeting what they're trying to achieve, and they're also not necessarily spending their plans either. So there are some real challenges the Commonwealth are trying to work through at the moment with NDIS around making sure the planning process is right under what's called reasonable and necessary supports, making sure the plans are right and meets the needs of the individual and that they are reasonable and it's considered necessary. But also then trying to do a lot of work with individuals and then also the markets to try and ensure if they are given these sort of plans, where do we need to build greater capacity to actually ensure the people can access those supports that help them with their independence and mobility. So that's the end of sort of the formal part of the presentation, but I just wanted to open it up more for questions because I've sort of just touched on a few different things which I was was sort of thinking that was requested to look at, but I want to sort of be open and to questions and be able to respond to questions I find making sure I meet what you're looking for in a presentation, or what you're looking for in a discussion. Make sure I meet those needs.
Thank you, Ian. That's covered a lot of ground there, talking about the activities of Guide Dogs Victoria and leading through to the way it's actually funded and touching on issues about the challenges of the future. So thank you for that. And I'm sure there'll be questions probably in all of those areas. And while people start thinking about that, could I ask one about the dogs program and the dogs themselves? Can you tell us something about how do you go about matching up the needs of a person with the particular characteristics of one of your dogs?
Yeah, so that's a you know, what makes, I think, guide dogs is it's not a simple sort of process, and we try and keep it as simple as possible for the client, but it isn't a simple process. It's quite a in-depth assessment process. So there's a lot of work done, say, through the breeding, the training of the dog, and then they assess the dog. So they look at the dog and see as they train the dog and what the characteristics, personalities, and traits of that dog, as well as their physical the physical attributes to the dog. So does the dog walk quickly? Does it walk slowly? Does it have a lot of initiative, and or is it sort of more a bit sort of laid back? So they look at all these different sort of personality traits and characteristics of the dog, and then they have an assessment with the individual. And so, for example, myself, I've got fairly high needs. I travel a lot. I travel interstate. I go to lots of different areas. So I need a dog with a lot of drive, a lot of innovation, a lot of initiative, very confident. But I also, part of my job, I sit around a lot too. So the dog's a bit of a super dog. I've got a dog that's then happy to also just lay around and sit and wait to be ready to go to work. So as part of the training process, they sort of assess that in the dog, and then they try to work out the match. So if I'm an elderly lady that walks slowly, and all I do is walk from my house up to the local shops or local cafe, have a drink, and sort of walk back, then you need a dog who's got a lot of initiative and a lot of drive. Is not going to work for that individual. They're going to get bored really quick, and that then might lead to behavioural issues. But if you've got a dog that's a bit more laid back and just happy to just do a little bit of plodding along and a little bit of work, so their guiding component will be whatever dog they are. They'll all be able to guide well, as far as the stop at curves, avoid obstacles, look at traffic management, walk around, find pathways through crowds and individuals. So they'll all be able to do all of that. The stop at stairs, find doors, those basic sort of mobility things of a dog. But what's different is in the matching process is you want to make sure that the dogs match personalities, traits, and drives and initiative, match with the individuals, what their needs are as far as how busy they are, and because you don't want to put a dog that's that's happy to just plod up and down the street into with a busy person, because they're probably going to get a bit anxious. All of a sudden they're going to be asked to do a lot more than probably what they're bred, or what they're trained to do.
Thanks.
So it is a complex process. Yeah.
There've been a couple of questions already in the chat, Ian, so perhaps if I read them out.
Okay, that would be great.
First one is from Alan. Ian, how will the electric cars being silent affect your clients?
Very challenging. So there's a lot of work and we're advocating with government around some of the electric cars, and that includes the electric scooters as well. They do make it quite challenging, because the dogs, the dogs are quite good with traffic management. They have what they call intelligent disobedience. And so therefore, for example, if I approach a road and they stop at the curb, and then the normal command is you go forward. Now, if there's a car in the near vicinity, the dog, and I call it self-survival, to be honest, but they call it intelligent disobedience. But the dog is not likely or less likely to walk in front of the car, because they're going to go, hang on, I'm not going to walk straight in front of that car because that's too close. So they do a lot of work in their training around that. So they tell the dog to go forward, and there'll be another instructor or trainer in the car who's driving quite quickly up to the intersection. So they do a lot of that's part of the whole training to ensure the dog doesn't go in. So the silence, it does make it more challenging, but the dog should be able to assist in not walking onto the road. But if you're with a white cane and mobilising with a white cane, you don't have that same a second set of eyes looking out for you. it is making it really challenging. So we are working closely with government around that, and whether there should be some, like in a lot of across the United States and through Europe, the regulations require electric cars to have a slight hum noise to them, so there is an audible sound to the car. But in Australia at this stage, we don't have those requirements on regulations.
Thanks. Does that answer your question, Alan?
Yes, thanks, Ian. I felt that could be a challenge.
Yeah, and electric scooters are the other challenge, because they've got a slightly different challenge. One, they're silent and they zip around quite quickly, and often walkways and pathways. But the other thing with electric scooters, those who ever spent much time in the city more recently, they people park them and just lay them everywhere. So they've now become lots of additional obstacles that people who are blind and low vision have to navigate. So again, I navigate with the dog, and the dogs are really good. But if you're not navigating with the dog, it becomes, a lot more sort of challenging to navigate your way through the city now with all these electric scooters just laying around all over the place.
Thanks, Ian. And Rodney has asked, does the current availability of dogs match the requirement within the vision impaired community?
Varies from year to year. Like this year, we probably not. So we've got a number of people on our wait list at the moment, which we're not going to be able to allocate all the dogs this year for. And it is hard to ramp up and down the program. One of our biggest challenges is the puppy raising component. Puppy raising has become highly competitive now. So where early on there was only really guide dogs and potentially seeing eye dogs that were looking for sort of puppy raisers. So there was a reasonably good access or supply of puppy raisers. Now you've got border force dogs, you've got police dogs, you've got other assistance dogs. So there's a whole range of organisations now looking for puppy raisers. And so all of a sudden, access to puppy raisers becomes a real sort of challenge. So we've got the capacity to potentially breed, say, up to 200, which would give us, so at the most, 150 dogs, 140 dogs gives us about 40 to 45 guide dogs. So if we wanted to increase the number of guide dogs, we'd have to, well, a couple of things we're trying to do is look at our breeding and training to try and get greater productivity efficiency in our dogs and numbers that will make it through. But secondly, you've just got to increase your quantity of dogs. So if we move to 170 dogs, that's 30 more puppy raisers, and that's one of the challenges we have is making sure these dogs have got a home to go to once they've been bred.
I take it, Ian, that you get great companionship with your dog, and that's a real side benefit, irrespective of your vision handicap. And that's very much what's being thought of for a lot of people as they age, that companionship, if they're single, is a very important aspect of life extension and enjoyment in life. And I'm just wondering, is there any association in training companion dogs? You mentioned the police dogs and so on. That's pretty easy to understand, but just straight in companionship, because there is a need in various hostels, etc., and individuals in their homes that could do well with a companion dog.
Very much so. So one of the things that we've done, and it's only sort of been the last 12 to 18 months, we've done quite a big, a lot of work in relationship to that space. So we see the value add these dogs have beyond their skills to support an individual around their mobility. And I know personally myself, as you say, the companionship the dog gives you and the comfort the dog gives you is quite, is very sort of valuable on top of the dog's role around mobility. So we traditionally, with our breeding, we would have had bred around 150 dogs a year, and about 45 to 50 make it through as guide dogs, and we were selling about 100 of those off just as pets. And so there's a lot of work we did because we acknowledged and recognised there's actually a real need for these pets of therapy or companion dogs, and what I spoke about, the facility type dogs. And so last year we put about 35 dogs into the Pets for Therapy Facilities program. This year we're aiming to turn that to 50. So there'll be about 45 to 50 that'll be guide dogs, 45 to 50 that'll be Pets for Therapy dogs, and there'll be 50 that won't necessarily meet the requirements or the needs to be either. So the companion dogs have still got to be well trained, and so they may where they may not make it as a guide dog, it's more because of their ability to potentially concentrate for long periods, or they might have a mild level of anxiety in certain environments. But in a Pets for Therapy, for a pet or companion or Pets for Therapy dogs, less of an issue. But the dogs are really, that they provide great company, great companionship, and a very sort of social friendly dog. So we are very much in the same agreement. So that said, we've got a few in courts now. We're going to do a little bit more in some of the other human services areas where there's lots of children and child protection issues, working in those sort of spaces, in some of the schools, particularly the schools with disabilities. But in the older population, I agree, there's work that we're going to be thinking about. What we look for is you can't just have a dog with no one being a primary carer for it, like just wander around a nursing home. You need someone that takes some ownership and responsibility for the dog for its own well-being and care. So, but we are looking at where we can think about where dogs can be placed, long as they've, have got the sort of supports, but add enormous value. My puppy dog, the puppy I'm raising, Samira, my wife's actually physio at the Mornington Centre at Peninsula Health. So it's a 90-bed subacute space. And both the patients and the staff find it absolutely amazing. So the value add that she's done in that space, both to staff, but also to the patients, and encouraging patients to go down to the gym and do their physio because they know that the puppy's going to be down in the gym. Where historically sometimes people wouldn't go down there because of they couldn't be bothered or had less motivation. But now so many people love to just pop down there because the puppy's down there, and they get that sort of bit of an incentive to see the puppy and even pat the puppy at their end of their physio. So it's been a really it's been a great thing.
Good, thank you.
Thanks. Glenys, you put up a question. Do you want to ask it?
Yes, all breeds of dogs have genetic problems, don't they? So do you selectively breed?
We do. We're careful with the breeding matching. So we actually breed predominantly for personality traits and behaviours. So we track all these dogs and look at their personality and behaviours and traits, but we also look at the physical ailments as well. So we've pretty well bred out elbow dysplasia. So by our breeding sort of program and the work that we've done, we have a vet on site that works with us, and we've done so the whole breeding program is quite scientific, and which dogs match with which and different things to try and avoid it. Now, it's not always avoidable. There's some unforeseen conditions that come through that we've we've got no history of in our genetics, and sometimes some of these dogs do get unwell and get sick, whether it's cancer, whether it's different sort of conditions which are a little bit unforeseen. Labradors, cancer, heart, hips and back are always a bit of a problem, and elbow dysplasia, but we've bred out a lot of it where we can. But the other thing is it's also about the well-being and the care of the dog. So there's obviously regular checks with these sort of dogs because weight management's critical. So, if you've got a really overweight Labrador, and Labradors, that's a tendency is to go that way because if they see food, they'd like to eat it. There's no filter on it. So, you need to be really careful in the diet of the dog and care for the dog, because an overweight Labrador, an overweight guide dog has got a very shortened lifespan because it is stressful on their joints, it's stressful on their heart. So we do regular checks with the dogs and the client to make sure the dog's meeting the client's needs and those sort of things, but also check the dog's being cared for and the welfare of the dog is being looked after.
Thank you.
Yes, Neil.
That last statement leads into the question of how much exercise do the dogs need, and are there difficulties in providing the amount of exercise that the dog needs?
I think Labradors are innately lazy, so they don't need a lot of exercise, because they often say they're sort of the big dogs. But so like Olympia, I've got now, she's 9.5 years of age. I take her for a walk in the morning every day, and generally a walk at the end of the day, as well as what she gets when I move around work. And some days I have a much busier day in what I do around moving around. Other days, like today, she's probably spent 6 hours in her bed. So, you know, she happily sleeps away, and that's what they seem to enjoy. So, and that's what I was saying before a bit about the matching process. You don't want to give a high energy dog to an individual that's got low energy or doesn't do much themselves. So we do try and match. If you've got a higher energy dog that's got higher energy needs, we'll match it with an individual who's quite active and does a lot of walking, a lot of activity. And then you've got your other dogs, which are, you know, are quite low energy dogs and low initiative and low energy dogs or low drive dogs. And they'll be matched more with people that are less active. And that sort of helps meet that sort of, you know, that need to make sure the dog gets the right amount of exercise for that individual. But I do the walk as well for my own exercise. So it's you know, it's good for both of us to walk her and walk myself. It's about getting the balance right between activity and food. So if you've got a dog that's fairly inactive, or you're not, you know, less active, you know, it's really careful that you're not, you know, it's the old energy in, energy out. So you're not feeding them, you know, and as I said, Labradors, you can't leave it up to them to self-limit, because they never will. So really you supply these to self-limit that sort of food, and be careful in the amount of food the dog gets.
And it's my perception that guide dogs are generally accepted in society, but are there still problems in terms of acceptance anyway? Generally, in Australia, we're pretty lucky. So there is very few access issues within Australia. So dogs are able to pretty well go everywhere. I was in Sydney last week and Canberra the week before, and so I travel quite frequently. So dog travels on the plane with me, just at my feet, or on the seat next to me, on the ground on the seat next to me. So trains, buses, all those sort of things. There are some challenges still with rideshare and taxis. That's, you know, it's slowly improving, but there are still on occasions, you know, there are taxi refusals. Restaurants, very, very few access issues nowadays. I think there's a lot better understanding and knowledge and literacy out there, and education that's been done around with restaurants and restaurant owners. I get very few, and we get reports, very few reported access issues around restaurants. The main one would be predominantly still would be taxi and rideshare, like Ubers and those sort of things. That's probably the biggest area where there's still some access challenges for people who are accompanied by guide dogs. Right, thank you. I had one actually in Sydney Airport last Thursday, actually, when I arrived at Sydney. The taxi refused to take me. So it's fortunately it's less common, but it does happen. Iain, you've covered a lot of ground, not only in your presentation, but in those questions. So once again, we thank you very much for being with us and being our speaker at our annual general meeting. It's,
no worries.
We appreciate the fact that you've been able to give up your time, and appreciate the work that you've put into preparing the presentation and being with us. So let's thank Iain with, and most people are muted, but I can see people clapping all over the screen, Iain. So and there are a number of comments in the chat as well, expressing appreciation. So thanks for the opportunity, Jeffrey, to come along and talk to the group. Much appreciated. It's always good to share our story and engage with different people. So thanks very much for the opportunity.